Hi, so today we're talking about four types of pruning cuts that every arborist should know. So we'll get right into it here. First type is a reduction cut. This is made at a branch union. Some people call this cutting back to a lateral. So you'll see that terminology sometimes too. Take the branch back to a lateral, cut back to a lateral. But it happens at the branch union. It's when we're removing the larger of the two branches at the branch union. So a good kind of spec for a reduction cut might be reduce the branch by 25%. And we're looking at it as in terms of the branch union, but the branch as a whole is probably going to get shorter as a result of the reduction cut. But when we're looking at it at that branch union, we're taking the larger of the two sides of the branch union. So on our diagram here, we can see this would be a good spot for a reduction cut. At that branch union, we're taking the larger of the two branches there in terms of diameter, and the overall length of that branch is going to be shorter because of it. There would be another good spot for a reduction cut. And we want to keep in mind that although we're keeping the smaller diameter of those two branches, we still want that smaller branch to be at least a third of the diameter of the larger one. If not, it's actually a different kind of cut instead of reduction cut, which we'll get into a little later. Next type of cut is a branch removal. So this is also made at a branch union, but it's kind of the opposite of the reduction cut in that we're going to be taking the smaller of the two branches at that branch union. This is the easiest type of cut for the tree to heal over. We want to make sure that we're placing the cut outside of the branch collar and not to damage the branch bark ridge. So we don't want to put the cut too far in, but we also don't want to go too far out on it, because if we place the cut too far away from the branch collar, we're going to end up with a stub. So on this diagram here, there might be a good spot for a removal cut, and in a work order or a spec for it, we would just say remove branch, remove this branch. I like to draw diagrams, but something like that might be a good spec for it. Here might be another spot for a reduction cut, or if we're removing the branch, we can put it there. And you can see the diagram kind of has a branch collar there. We're coming just outside of that branch collar to make our branch removal cut. Next kind of cut to know is a heading cut. This one, it's placed between nodes, so you're cutting it back to a bud, or when we had mentioned that third rule for reduction cuts, if you're cutting back to a branch that's less than a third of the other diameter of the branch at a branch union, that could be considered a heading cut, but it's between nodes, so you usually end up with a stub with this kind of cut. You might not if you're taking it back to a small branch, but it's going to be difficult for the tree to heal over the cut from a heading cut. You're also going to lose some apical dominance, so you might end up with water sprouts as a result of this, particularly in trees that have a lot of dormant bud sites. Usually it's not appropriate to make these kind of cuts in a lot of established trees. There are some situations where you will make a heading cut, and that's why it's included in this list. So in orchard pruning and fruit production, you make this kind of cut. If you're starting a pollarding, if you're preserving or creating wildlife habitat, or sometimes I've seen it used to avoid removing a really large diameter limb. So if you didn't want to put a really big cut and expose a lot of heartwood on the tree by removing a large limb, you could come out a little farther and make a heading cut. Maybe you're clearing a house or doing some kind of work like that. So it's a little iffy there, but it could be appropriate in that kind of situation. A place that I see this cut made a lot, although it's not appropriate, is when you're topping a tree. So topping a tree, you're kind of just making heading cuts across the top of it. Creates a lot of water sprouts, creates a lot of issues for the tree too. But yeah, not appropriate, but those are heading cuts. Fourth, so there would be a good spot for a heading cut, or maybe not a good spot for a heading cut, but that's a spot on the diagram that a heading cut could be made. You can see it with the red line there. And the fourth kind of cut, shearing. So it's typically done with hedges or in topiary. On a mature tree, probably not appropriate. I didn't draw any lines on this diagram here for shearing because on a mature tree, there aren't a lot of good spots to do this. But in topiary and hedges, it's done all the time. And that you're cutting leaves, you're cutting branches, you're trying to get to a specific shape. It's usually done with like hedge trimmers or specialized tools like that. The proper way to shear would be to not cut off all of the new growth on a planting and try to combine it with some removal and reduction cuts. Otherwise, you end up with kind of like this dense, thin layer of foliage on the outside edge of the plant. And it really reduces the plant's ability to photosynthesize. It can lead to a lot of other problems.